Welcome back. My name's Angie. I am an intuitive life coach focused on helping you align your soul with your highest self and purpose. I offered a 2-day training diving into the programming of our ego. In this training, I teach about how trauma programs our ego, as well as our spiritual beliefs and the understanding of the need to belong in this world. This 2-day training will help you to learn more about yourself as well as the programming of your ego. And if you were interested, I invite you to stay tuned. If you are an empathic woman or a healer or life coach, I also want to invite you to my 4-week course starting in June. And this course focuses on reprogramming our ego and getting back in touch with our intuitive abilities, bringing balance between our spirit and ego, and allowing us to begin to align with the manifestations that we truly desire in this life. If that is you, you can find a link below to join the course. And I would love to hear any messages or comments about this training that you would like to share. If there is anything else or any questions that you have regarding this training, you are also welcome to reach out and leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe and follow for more understanding of the program of your ego. Reprogramming the Ego, a journey into the ego, mind, and spirituality. My name's Angie. I am an intuitive life coach and healer. I help people to align with their soul purpose, and to really reprogram their mind, and to dive into the parts of themselves that have been programmed by the world, to release those beliefs, to come back into their true highest self and their spiritual self. And it is a journey for sure to do that. And I am on the same one and have been for quite a while. So we will go into the ego mind, how trauma impacts the brain, and spirituality. So the ego, I will share, first of all, this is my second book that I've written, and it is called Composting the Ego. And in this book, I write a lot of the things I'm going to share in this training. So I do encourage you to grab this. It is on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, anywhere online that you can find a book. It is intuitively written. I will say that when I wrote this, I purposely tried to keep my ego out of everything I said. I'm sure there's lots of parts of my ego in this. However, I really wanted this to be written directly through my spirit. So I spent a lot of time with my spirit guides and my spirit team channeling messages to write into this book. And the book talks about the balancing of the ego with the spirit, and in allowing ourselves to merge the two so that we can live at our highest self and not believe all these limiting thoughts that we often fight with during our life. And so there are many definitions of the ego. And especially if you are in the spiritual community, if you are considered a light worker or a healer or a shaman or shawoman or anything like that, you probably have in some way heard about the ego or had, teachings on it. And I have found in my understanding or my study of the spiritual communities is that the ego often gets a really bad rap, that it seems to kind of be the evil part of us that we want to conquer, the enemy that we want to overcome. But when you come back out and you look at the entire system, kind of like what I was talking about with the family system and how you can't just focus on one part, we begin to understand that the ego has a very important role in our human life. And so our ego is our sense of personal identity, feelings, and our self-importance. So it is the human aspect of who we are, and the actual reason of why we became a human. It helps us identify our uniqueness. So here's something really amazing. And I write this in my book. If you think about it, there is a known fact that nobody has the same fingerprints in the entire world. This is how people can do, like, criminal cases. They can dive into all kinds of things simply by looking up your fingerprints or your hair. You have a specific kind of hair, and of course, if it's left behind on a crime scene, you'll be able to be found. And here, the other thing that we don't think about is that as unique as our fingerprints and hair and even our eyes are, our voice is just as unique as everything else. And so when we think about how unique we are in our humanity and how different we each are, we're able to take a step back and see our ego and our body and personality as more of a divine thing and a more of a part of the universe and God's creation than our actual enemy and something that we're trying to conquer. Because the reality of it is our spirit came into these bodies, and these bodies are simply our protection in the lower frequencies that we are in. So how is our actual ego programmed? And this is something that a lot of the spiritual community probably already has some insight on. But in case you don't, we come, and these are some intuitive insights I've received from my guides. It's been pretty amazing to get these insights, and it's always fun to hear from them, because it's kind of like you wake up, your spirit is like, oh, that is right. Because we don't remember this part of ourselves before we kind of awaken back into our true and highest self, our spirit self. So our spirit is energy. And when we are on the other side of our human life in this spiritual realm, we are an energy. Our energy is connected with all the universe, all divine beings. Our energy is everything. And again, I encourage you to grab my book, Composting Ego, because I do talk about a intuitive insight and vision I had of actually seeing the presence of God and the energy of God and who we are and how we're created out of that same energy. So we are God experiencing itself within the realm of the universe. We are the energy of God. We are the I am. And if you know anything about any religious teachings, it doesn't matter if it's from Jesus or Buddha or any spiritual teachers prior, there's a focus of the I am. And this teaching is simply to remind us that we are the energy of God. We are God experiencing itself. And so our spirit, in some aspects, wants to understand what it's like to be God, what it's like to hold this amount of love and frequency in itself. And so we choose to come and be a human, to develop a contrast between light and darkness, with love and pain, and merge the two together to learn and grow in love. The whole purpose of our human life is to bring us back to love. And when we're born, we know this. However, this is programmed out of us as we get older, and we start to become formed with the society and the beliefs that we're taught around us, instead of remembering ourselves and our spirits and where we actually came from. So when we become a human, our spirit actually decides to come to earth. And in the moment of our birth, when the spirit actually enters the human body, the baby, around 6 to 7 months, the spirit is able to come and go out of the baby. It doesn't always necessarily stay present within the body until right before it's born. And so the spirit is beginning to experience what it's like to be in a human body. Now, many of us have been here many times through reincarnation, whether you believe that or not. That is something I did not used to believe in when I was programmed in religion. I thought it was evil to think that, but in my intuitive insights, my visions, my experiences that I've had, it has been confirmed over and over to me that it is real, and that many of us, especially those of us who are awakening and coming into our spiritual gifts now, have been here many times. And so in that aspect, we are allowed to remember our spirit self. And many lifetimes prior to this, we probably did not remember this part of who we are. And so we're in a really amazing time on earth right now. I won't go into all of that because that's a whole nother subject, but the fact that you are actually alive right now means that you have a purpose in the global awakening and shifting that is happening all over the earth. And so you are a part of the frequency and light that expands the growth of the universe, really. And so as the baby is coming into this human body and is birthed into this world, as a spirit, it knows the frequency of love. And the other side, the spiritual world, in the many, I'm not sure how to explain this, but the times I've visited the spiritual realm, it is pure love. It is pure energy. There's no way to describe this energy. There's absolutely no words in the human comprehension to describe this kind of love and this kind of expanded energy. It's beyond anything that we could feel or understand as a human. And so our spirit comes into this little human body, and we're born knowing that love. And we immediately go into this lower frequency of energy where we come out of the wound and we begin to cry, because it's in a way shocking for us to go from this amazing frequency of love where there's no pain, no suffering, there's nothing bad in this realm, to this lower frequency and energy where suddenly we feel pain, we feel the atmosphere around us, we have all these emotions suddenly. And the first thing that we want to do is grasp onto that love that we just left. And so there's teachings, and I have a course that I'm going to be starting next month. It's called the Empathic Intuitive, and it's really diving into the power of being an empath. But in that training, or in that 4-week course, I will go a little bit more in depth into this actual part of our programming of the ego, where that connection with the mother is so very important in that first moment, in the first seconds of coming into the world, that our ego's programming begins right away as soon as we come into this earth and to these lower frequencies. And so without the connection with the mother, we begin to seek ways to fill ourselves with that love that we just left. And then it just continues after there. Now, there are a lot of beautiful mothers out there that have, nobody's perfect in this world. Nobody's perfect as a human. And so, dropping any labels of shame or doing anything wrong is, needs to happen. But that part of the process of why we even came to be a baby and grow into the, adults we are now, is to experience this type of pain and this type of frequency. It sounds strange to think of it that way, but we really did choose to feel this. So as we grow older, We are placed in this family. We, choose this family to be in. And that is when our ego's programming starts. Our very first programming starts with the need to belong, our need to be loved. The need for love and acceptance drives our behaviors because our spirit, our true self knows that that is all that matters. Our true self understands that the energy of love and the connection of all things is the reality of life. That is the reality of everything. It's what we're made of, it's where we come from. And then when we're disconnected from that, our desire is to get back to it in whatever way we possibly can. However, we have this barrier now of this human body and mind that separates us from that frequency. And so as our ego is programmed, it begins to develop the ability to protect us, and it kind of builds a barrier within for our spirit to be in. And then the process of forgetting who we are happens, where we separate from our spirit in some aspect in our mind anyways into our ego self to fit into the world and society that we're born into, whether that is everything from the family system that you were born in, to the cultural you're born in, to the part of the world you're born in, to the education, to the spiritual beliefs. All that begins to develop and create the person that you are. So our ego, it does its job very well, and we actually should not be spending our time trying to rid ourselves of our ego, but to train it. Because if you look at it again, you come out and you look at it from a different lens of the whole system, it does protect us in this lower frequency on earth, and it is the protector of our spirit as well. So if you were to see our ego and our body as an actual animal, we are training that part of us. So if we come into a element of trauma, if we are born into a family that has trauma, or even a cultural trauma, like if there's people that grew up in the Great Depression, there's people that grew up in the wars, there's people that have developed, they've had natural disasters happen around them, like anything that could happen that causes fear or anxiety or a need to protect yourself in some way can be considered trauma. A lot of times society will take the word trauma and make it about something really horrific that happens. And that is trauma, but trauma is something that causes you to feel unsafe and to feel alone and to feel as if you have to protect yourself in some way. So it could simply be a really bad storm that happened when you were younger, maybe around 3 or so, and then now all through your life, every time a similar storm happens, your actual energetic system, the programming of your ego reacts in the exact same way that your 3-year-old self did. So trauma effectively imprints the stressful event in the brain. And that is why when that event happens, it continues and repeats throughout your life. The memory of the traumatic event is stored in the amygdala, which ensures that you do not find yourself in this dangerous situation again. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is here in a second. However, the amygdala doesn't save the event as if it was a story. So this, you might hear about people that have disassociation, or if you've been through really significant trauma as a child, or you had repeated events happen that caused you fear in your life, especially growing up, anywhere between the time you were born until age 7, you were developing your safety system in the world. And then after that, you start developing your relationships with the people and the culture around you. And so that programming that happens in those first years of our life are really significant to how we live our life, even as adults. We can continue to repeat the same patterns because the emotional significance of the traumatic event that you experience by your 5 senses actually programs into your energetic field and your ego. So the memory is the fragment, like you can have little moments of that you can remember of events, such as the smell, sounds, tastes, and touch of the experience, but the actual event and seeing it in your mind could be very foggy. But your energetic system, your body, the way you feel is programmed. So if you were to look at your body as like a computer system, our body is programmed. Like when we're built, when we are a child, we're building our computer system. And so our wires are being put together at this time. And when we're wired in a certain way, just like any other programming, you will always do the same function over and over. And so if you crash or your system gets a bug in it, you actually have to reboot and rewire the entire system to have a different reaction. And so if there's something that you've struggled with since you were young, or there's been things in your life that have been frustrating for you, like cycles that you've repeated, it could just be because you were programmed to have that in your energetic field. And instead of looking at it as a programming of our ego, we sometimes allow shame to come in and control our thinking and our minds, and we make the programming our identity instead of just part of our system that needs to be rewired. And so this explains, I'm going to just briefly touch on this. So the amygdala, if you see here, right here in this part of the middle of your brain, is responsible for the perception of emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, as well as controlling aggression. The amygdala helps to store memories of events and emotions so that an individual may be able to recognize similar events in the future. So as we get older, like I said, our programming keeps all of this memory and energy system in our amygdala. The amygdala is attached to our entire nervous system. It goes from head to toe. Our vagus nerve, if you see this, there's a vagus nerve that goes right along here down the back of us, and it connects our entire system. So when we're triggered in our amygdala, when a memory or a feeling or a smell or a sound happens, immediately it goes into protective mode to keep this same thing happening that happened prior. And it, in many ways, if you had really significant abuse or trauma as a child where you disassociated, where you actually left your body, where you shut your entire system and brain down to protect yourself, that will happen again as an adult when you're triggered in the same way, and your entire body will react the same way it did then. And we don't always recognize this because what we have been taught to do, or what we do, is we go to numb the feeling instead of understanding what the feeling's telling us. And that's where the healing process begins, where we dive into the actual event, and we rewire the event, and we heal that part of our story so that that feeling, the emotion, the reaction doesn't continue to control our lives. So we have to reconnect with our body. In many ways, what I've come to understand spiritually is allowing our spirit to come back and regulate our system instead of our body and our ego system controlling our reactions. The hippocampus is this part of our brain right here. As you see, it's all connected with the same part of our brain right in the middle. And it is the structure embedded deep into the temporal lobe. And so a lot of people talk about it being in the back right here. It is our memory and learning. So if you've had trauma, if you've been through things in your life that disconnected you from yourself, the amygdala causes the hippocampus to shut down in those moments to protect you so that you don't remember the event, so that you can get through it without being overwhelmed. Now, humans are very interesting beings because we are the only mammal, or whatever you want to say, that is not able to shake off fear and shake off trauma. In the animal world, especially if you look into documentaries of lions and all chasing things, what happens is when fear arises into an animal, they run, they begin to protect themselves. But as soon as the fear leaves, their entire system goes back into relax mode, and they release all the dopamines and all the energies that built them up to escape that event. Now, humans, we don't do that. We keep that in our body, and then we repeat it over and over and over. And if we don't deal with it, it can control our life. It can actually cause us to be reactive to things that are not even needing to have reactions. So the amygdala will actually enlarge and the hippocampus will shrink. So the remembering part will become smaller and the alarm part of your brain grows bigger. So that is why triggers often control our lives, but you cannot remember why you were reacting this way. And this is where inner child healing comes. This is where meditation is very helpful, and reprogramming your mind so that you can actually heal that part of your brain. And it has been scientifically proven in all of my meditation training and my mindfulness training. It has been proven over and over that you can heal your brain. You can actually shrink the amygdala back to its size and bring back the hippocampus into the original structure. And I will tell you, and this is not to scare you, this is something I have personally experienced, and I've had some of my clients that I work with experience as well, is that when you begin to heal the brain, some things in your body begin to feel worse because the energetic system has been hidden within you in many ways a protective barrier. And when you allow the energy to be exposed and to be opened, the feelings begin to come out. And instead of running to eat or drink or numb the feeling in some way, the healing process, you have to allow yourself to feel it so that it releases. It's kind of like taking the pressure off of a pop exploding, like the more you shake it up, with our body is shaken up with all the energy. When we take it off, it has to go somewhere. And that's what the healing process allows for us to do, is to release the energy. And it doesn't feel good while we're doing it, but it clears it out so that we can reprogram our energetic system in our mind. And the amazing thing about this is because our body does remember and our mind might not, things start to catch up in you, and you might just start to have flashbacks. You might start to remember events that happened. And I've had this experience several times in the last few years in my own healing journey, where I knew things had happened in my childhood and my body, and I felt things, but I didn't have the memory. And so as I was healing, I began to learn and understand that sometimes when I was healing something, I may not know what I was healing, but my body did. And I had to allow myself to feel whatever was coming up. And then eventually, not always, my mind would remember what it was healing. And I don't always want my mind to remember what I'm healing, because sometimes it is hard to remember those things, but it can happen because it kind of pulls everything together and you're healing that part of your mind where your memory is stored. So the ego versus spirit, again, looking at the entire system with your mind, body, and soul. When you begin to balance this out, you get back in touch with your divine energy, your spirit, and your intuition. In our programming, in our growth, in our becoming our adult self, we at one point likely disconnected from our spirit, where we forgot about this part of ourselves. And in that, we lost the ability to trust our intuition. We lost the ability to understand how to use that navigation and compass that we have in our spirit to guide our lives. And in many ways, this is how empaths are created in this world, because in our early lives, you had, because of the alarm system that your brain was developing and the need to protect yourself in many ways, you became hypersensitive to energy. You became overly sensitive. And so this allowed your brain to always be in alert and look for threats. So it could, in a very young age, and I go into this as well in my my empathetic intuitive course that I'm offering, and I will teach you a little bit more about this, but we began to be able to read energy, feel energy, and see energetic changes around us. And it actually can be used in a really amazing way if you are a healer or a coach, but you do have to practice and have some intuitive insights about how to do that. But bringing the system back into balance with your spirit and ego, and building a connection between the both parts of you, will actually bring a balance where you can begin to trust yourself more, and you stop looking outside of yourself for things to meet your needs. And this is a whole nother process that healing will take you through, but it is possible to do that. So the ego's attempt to protect and solve problems cut off the flow of your spirit, leaving a void. And in that, you begin to mimic others around you to seek approval and acceptance. Again, going back to the original need of a human is belonging and love. So the mimicking of others, the seeking approval, the need for acceptance, to fill the void of disconnect in self, the disconnect of your spirit and your ego, will keep you in a cycle of looking for things outside of yourself to fill the void that only you can fill within yourself, by developing a connection with your spirit and a self-love and building love within your own self. And this will open all kinds of beautiful things within you, but it is a process, and it does take time to be able to do this. And so working with a healer or a coach that understands the concepts of energy and ego and spirit is really beneficial on that journey.